So the suspicion started right there. What are they hiding?
Well, I think it's just a tragic accident.
This is a story with a lot of twists and turns. It's complicated and may leave you with more questions than answers.
My God, why did you do this?
I don't think that absent some convoluted theory, they can prove he did anything wrong.
It's a story where I can only report the facts I've researched and share what's been told to me by both sides. You have to make up your own mind about what you think happened.
And it came out from my mouth immediately, who beat my kid?
There was no evidence in the case that he had any sort of a serious head injury.
It's a story of two families forever changed after a college party on a bitterly cold February night in Southern Illinois in 2014.
I said, how can we get a second autopsy?
I said, well, something's wrong here. Let me get involved now.
2 autopsies that showed 2 different results and a stunning, unexpected ending that may not really be the ending to the story at all.
I needed to clear my son's name, and I needed to know what happened. That I got.
There is no statute of limitations on murder either.
I'm Briana Collins. This is True Crime in Color. Pravin Varughese loved to have fun. His mother, Lovely, describes him as a happy child.
He was never quiet. He started talking in sentences probably by like 1 year old. So he never stopped talking, always into things. There was not a quiet moment in the house when he's home. You hear the music, you hear him go up and down the stairs. Such a loving kid. He was so close to us. Any party, he was life of the party. He was like the center of attention.
I believe that. I found this YouTube video of Pravin rapping Eminem's Lose Yourself on stage at a karaoke event. In the video, you can tell he's enjoying the attention and being on stage. He's confidently belting out the lyrics, dancing and bopping his head along to the music. He breaks into a huge grin as the crowd cheers once it's all over. Pravin's Indian American. He's about 5'7" with light brown skin, dark eyes, dark hair that in some pictures is cut very close, and in others is a bit longer in the front. He's a young man with an athletic build and a tattoo that says Fear God on his chest. By looking at pictures of Pravin, it's clear his appearance was important to him. His hair looks freshly cut and styled, and he's always dressed well. He's also almost always surrounded by family or friends in these pictures, and he's almost always smiling. Pravin was an athlete. He ran cross country, loved basketball and football, and he was funny.
One of his coaches for cross country, he was telling me after all this, he said, I've never seen anyone that can run this fast and crack jokes at the same time. He calls everyone with a nickname. He probably won't even know their real name. And he could talk in many accents, Australian accent, English accent, and then he would joke and say he's Australian or things like that. He was a jokester and such a joy, like happy, loved life. He loved his life. So that's why I feel so bad it ended so short.
Pravin loved his family. He was the middle child and the only boy. He was especially close with his big sister, who was just 17 months older.
They were like each other's secret keeper, So everything he did, she knew. Everything she did, he knew. And right after school, they go into one of their rooms and they talk about the whole day, like they knew everything. With the younger one, he was a caring brother. She was like 8 years younger, so if we go shopping and stuff, he's always watching out for her.
Pravin was popular and succeeded in high school. But his mother, Lovely, says he was ready for college.
He was very excited. We all are in medical field, so we were hoping he would pick something in medical field. But when he said he wanted to do criminal justice, I was so shocked. I said, no, you're not going. And he said, yes, that's what I wanted to do. So this was his plan. He wanted to be a police officer. And he said he would work as a police officer for 2 years and then he can get into FBI. That was his dream, to get into FBI.
Pravin decided to attend Southern Illinois University in Carbondale. It's about 6 hours from his Morton Grove home in suburban Chicago. Pravin and his cousin would be roommates, and Pravin would have one of his best friends close by as well, his older sister.
She was at St. Louis University at that time. So it took only like 2.5 hours for him to get there.
After high school graduation, Pravin packed up and headed off to college. While Lovely wasn't thrilled about her only son going to school hours away and studying criminal justice.
In the back of your mind, you have always that worry that they are so far away. But, you cannot just keep them at home.
But Pravin visited his parents often, and the two talked regularly.
Pravin never missed a day to call us. Always. Until the last day, he did.
Wednesday, February 12th, 2014. Pravin and Lovely talked like they did every day. But what Lovely didn't know, her son was going to a party that night. And this phone call right before that party would be the last time she'd ever talk to her son.
He called around 9 o'clock that night. I said, so how was the day? And he said, he just came back from the gym. Exercise was his number one thing. He wanted to keep his body, So every day he exercises. So we were just talking, and then he said he has an exam the next day, and then he's like, "Oh, where's Daddy?" And he had just come back from work, so he talked to him also, but he did not tell us they were going out. That is probably something. I mean, if he had told me, I would have said, "Don't go." But, they probably were doing it all along. And he said, "Good night, I love you." That was the last conversation.
The very next day, Thursday, February 13th, 2014, Pravin Varughese was reported missing. Call it mother's intuition, but Lovely says she knew something was wrong. She hadn't heard from Pravin, which she says just wasn't like him.
I woke up with some kind of uneasy feeling that day, and I didn't know what. So I thought, okay, I'm just going to go to employee health and take a day off.
Lovely is a nurse. She went to work with the intention to take the day off, but made a detour first.
Instead of going to the clinic, I went to the chapel. I had no idea why I was crying. So in the chapel, I'm just praying, every day, like I said, your kids are in college so far away. So you always pray for, Lord, please keep them safe. I came home and I slept in the couch. I don't know why I was being bothered like that. I could not eat. And I was just sitting here. Usually we have the TV on. That day, we didn't even have the TV on. We were just sitting here. That's when the phone rang and I picked up and I said, hello, and a strange voice, and he's like, hello. And I said, who is this? And he said, is Pravin home? I said, no, Pravin is in college. Who is this? And that's when he said, this is Carbondale police. And then he said, Pravin has been reported missing. So if he comes home, just tell him to call me. And then he was getting ready to hang up. And I'm like, is everything okay, sir? And I was like, oh my God, your whole world ended, So we got into the car right away. As soon as we heard that, we got in, we drove up. And I started calling his phone. When he didn't pick up the phone, I knew something bad happened, because that's not Pravin. He always picks up. Even if he doesn't pick up, I just have to leave a nasty message and he'll call me right back, So there was no way that he was going to make us all worry.
The search for Pravin began immediately. Pravin's cousin and roommate filed a missing persons report. His family made the trip to Carbondale. Lovely said detectives were searching Pravin's apartment, his room, his computer, looking at bank records. That weekend was filled with searches, tears, and questions. Hundreds of members of the Varughese family's community from their Morton Grove neighborhood drove to Carbondale to show their support and to help with the search for Pravin.
Sunday, one of the news channels came to us for an interview.
At this point, it had been 4 days since the party. That was the last time anyone saw Pravin.
So by then we had offered reward money. So we talked to the media pleading for, any help, because the police had no idea. They said there is no lead. The police was going to end the search. They told us they have no lead, so they were going to stop it. And I said, my God, please, I don't want to see my son's picture in all this, rest areas. When you travel, you see this. I said, I don't want him to be one of that. I said, I'm willing to accept the worst, but you need to find him.
News of the missing SIU sophomore spread around campus like wildfire. On the 5th day of Pravin's disappearance, Monday, February 17th, 2014, his peers held a vigil on campus while police continued the investigation. The next day, Carbondale police made a gruesome discovery.
Tuesday morning, around 8 o'clock, the dean of the college came into our hotel room and said, the police has a tip and they are following up on it. So don't be worried if you hear helicopter and things like that. So then maybe in an hour or so, she got a call. She went down, came back with the deputy police chief, and he's the one who told us that they found him. He was found just 400 yards from the hotel we were staying.
On Tuesday, February 18th, 2014, 6 days after attending a party, 19-year-old Pravin Varughese was found dead in the woods in Carbondale, Illinois. Investigators say Pravin was found with no clothes on his upper body. His T-shirt was found under his right leg. Both shoes were off. One sock was on, one was off and found nearby, and his jeans had been pulled down near his thighs. Police said there were scratches and small cuts on Pravin's upper body, arms, his upper lip, and knuckles. They also reported a small bruise on his forehead.
At that point, what was law enforcement telling you happened to your son?
They said Pravin went to a party. He was drunk, possibly on drugs. He got into a car with a recent acquaintance. That's what they told us. And they had a fight, and Pravin ran into woods and died of hypothermia. So they had the whole story made up by then. So, they put the story into my head that Pravin was drunk. And then, I never saw him drinking. He never came home drunk. So it was hard for me to accept the fact that he probably would drink,
Based on statements from friends and witnesses, Carbondale police say Pravin attended a house party with friends the night of February 12th, 2014. Some who saw Pravin that night said he had 2 Four Locos, One can of Four Loko can have anywhere from 8% to 14% alcohol. The author of a study published in the American Journal of Public Health Research found just one Four Loko with 14% alcohol by volume is the equivalent of drinking 5.5 drinks. Pravin allegedly drank 2. Witnesses also told police they saw Pravin take 2 shots of rum, drink 2 beers, and he was playing beer pong just before leaving. A resident at the home where the party was taking place told police Pravin was slurring his speech and described him as intoxicated or highly intoxicated. But all this information has been disputed. Others who saw Pravin that night say he wasn't drunk at all. Pravin's friends reportedly left and he stayed behind. He was supposed to be getting a ride back from the party, but Pravin never made it home.
There are certain things that I knew about Pravin that I knew for certain that he would not do. And when they told me those kind of things, I'm like, that's not true. Pravin left some real cues for us. So I had to find the truth.
Immediately, Lovely said she had doubts about this story from police and lots of questions.
We asked, when can we see him? They said, you cannot see him. I don't know what he was thinking because we all are in medical field. So we know how a body is identified. So the suspicion started right there. What are they hiding? When the coroner said, you cannot see him. A funeral home of your choice will bring him to Chicago and then you can see him. And I said, why is that? Then how do you know it's Pravin? And then one of the detectives said, we identified him. I said, how? And he goes, so we found the ID. I said, it could be somebody else's ID. And I told the coroner, I said, no, you're not going to do this. I said, I don't want to go to Chicago and open the thing and see somebody else in the casket. I need to know this is my son. So I became a different person right then and there. And I started screaming. My husband was like, just kind of holding my hand and he squeezed my hand and he's like, don't say anything. But, something just woke up and said, this is not right.
Pravin's body was found on Tuesday, February 18th. The next day, Wednesday, February 19th, forensic pathologist Dr. James Jacoby performed an autopsy on Pravin at a Carbondale hospital. Dr. Jacoby's autopsy found environmental hypothermia, negative blood and urine toxicology, which means no drugs were found in Pravin's system, no significant trauma, 2 superficial abrasions on Pravin's left hand, and multiple abrasions on Pravin's arms and torso. Dr. Jacoby wrote that those abrasions were consistent with being found in a wooded area. Dr. Jacoby's opinion, Pravin died from hypothermia, and noted only minor superficial abrasions were present. Dr. Jacoby also noted nothing on Pravin was fractured. According to his findings, a small amount of alcohol was in Pravin's urine, 0.049%, but it's consistent with bacteria production during decomposition, and Dr. Jacoby called it insignificant. Dr. Jacoby did submit a supplemental report 2 months later that stated, based on toxicology and the autopsy, he can't conclusively say if Pravin had alcohol in his system before his death. That's because Dr. Jacoby says any alcohol or drugs would have continued to be metabolized until Pravin died. Many accepted Dr. Jacoby's findings. Lovely did not. She shared her doubts with the director of the funeral home.
And he said, Lovely, you are a nurse, right? I said, yes. And he goes, honey, you better see your son. He has injuries. This is not a frostbitten body. So when we went into the funeral home here, the thing on his forehead, there was a dent in his forehead. His whole body was beaten up, like his thigh it looks like somebody stamped him, with a boot. It was like a big bruise. And then his right arm had a big mark here. And it came out from my mouth immediately, who beat my kid?
Lovely wanted a second opinion. 2 days after Dr. Jacoby's autopsy, Dr. Ben Margolis performed another autopsy.
After the funeral, he called us and he told me that, we need to sit down on Monday and talk to you. I have suspicions.
Dr. Margolis's autopsy revealed something totally different than Dr. Jacoby's. It was almost as if the two weren't even looking at the same body. Dr. Margolis found multiple bruises on both legs, bruises on the arms and the middle of Pravin's forehead, scratches on Pravin's stomach and chest, abrasions on his left hand, and no evidence of frostbite. Margolis's cause of death for Pravin? Blunt force trauma. Lovely says blunt force trauma was easier for her to believe, given what she'd seen on Pravin's body.
I did not believe the first pathologist at all from the beginning, because when I saw Pravin here, I did not need a pathology degree to see Pravin has injuries.
So what happened to Pravin Varughese? Was it hypothermia? Blunt force trauma? How did Pravin end up in the woods? Remember, Pravin's friends left the party and he stayed behind. Police reports and information from the Jackson County State's Attorney at the time say that Pravin left the party around 11:53 the night of February 12th. There was another man at the party that night who agreed to give Pravin a ride home. His name is Gage Bethune. He's believed to be the last person who saw Pravin alive. Some call him a recent acquaintance. Others say the two men were strangers. Gage told detectives he was leaving the party when Pravin walked up to his truck and asked him for a ride. Gage said he felt sorry for Pravin, who apparently did not have on a coat, and Gage agreed to give Pravin a ride. Gage also alleges Pravin offered to get him some cocaine in exchange for that ride, but Gage says he declined. According to Gage's story, Pravin was persistent and made about 3 or 4 calls trying to get some. But detectives say Pravin's phone records don't show any calls during that time frame. According to Gage, Pravin was on his phone most of the car ride, and when Gage asked him which way to go, Pravin was vague with his directions. Gage claimed he grew frustrated driving in a town he wasn't familiar with, and he was almost out of gas. Gage said he turned onto Illinois Route 13 and told Pravin he could get out at a gas station down the road. That's when he alleges Pravin got mad and hit him. Here's what Gage says happened that night in an interview with police.
I offered the main ride. Driving along, right here, make a left here, right here, 30 minutes goes by, yada, yada, yada. Talking on the phone to his friends about some cocaine, whatever it was.
Do you remember how long his phone conversation was?
No, sir.
Did it seem like he made multiple calls?
Probably 2 to 3.
Did it sound like he ever successfully arranged for anything?
Not successfully. Maybe we were spending so much time and, just driving circles. I asked him multiple times, where are you going, where's your destination? He can't really give me an exact spot. And I told him, look, I gotta go. And he wasn't cooperating, and that's when he started to rage a little bit. And that's when he punched me in my eye, and I pulled over on the side of the road. A couple, hits were exchanged on the way. He was on top of me at one point, and I was on top of him at one point. Never once, the fight maybe lasted 30 seconds. I wouldn't even really call it a fight. A little scuffle. I do know for sure the first hit, I hit him dead square in his face.
And what stopped the fight? Gage said once he and Pravin were at the bottom of the hill, a police car arrived, and he yelled, "Cops!" Pravin then allegedly jumped up and ran into the woods. Illinois State Trooper Christopher Martin had just arrived on the scene. In court, Trooper Martin said it was freezing, about 6 degrees that night, when he saw Gage's truck on the side of Illinois Route 13. Trooper Martin's dash cam video shows Gage walking towards the trooper from the woods. Trooper Martin tells Gage to get back into his vehicle. Once inside the truck, Gage told Trooper Martin he was attacked by a black hitchhiker he picked up, and the man ran into the woods. Later on, Gage would admit this was a lie. The trooper noticed money on the floor of Gage's truck and a red mark on his face. In court, Trooper Martin said he thought Gage was lying, but he used the flashlight to shine into the woods quickly, and he didn't see anything. The whole encounter lasted about 8 minutes. Trooper Martin did not submit a report about the incident until days later, but according to court records, Trooper Martin says he felt like he did his job that night. But Lovely did not. She filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Trooper Martin. The lawsuit alleges if Martin had been more alert and acted more professionally, Pravin's life may have been saved that night. When Trooper Martin was asked if Pravin would still be alive if he investigated, he told the court he wasn't sure.
If the state trooper did anything like a normal human being who has some common sense would do, my son would be here today. He just flashed the light into the woods a couple times. Is it like, an extra paperwork or an extra phone call that he had to do? Why didn't he do it? So that is one thing that I hope this haunts him every day. A life is lost because of his lack of decision making that night. And he did not make a report for so many days. When I look back, that really, he dropped the ball.
I was not able to reach Trooper Martin for comment, but according to an Illinois employee database, he is still employed as an Illinois state trooper. The Varughese family also filed lawsuits against Gage, the city of Carbondale, the Jackson County coroner, and former Carbondale police chief Jody O'Gwin. O'Gwin was dismissed from the department 6 months after Pravin's body was found. According to Jackson County court records, all of the lawsuits were settled. I reached out to former Chief O'Gwin. I wanted to hear his side of the story and what he remembered about the case. He said he believes all that can be said about the tragic incident has been said in one of the many interviews he's already given, and he would not be interested in speaking about it again. Here's part of one of those interviews he did with Crime Watch Daily.
Why did you assert that there was no foul play suspected? This was before the autopsy results were in.
And we did ask the coroner if the injuries on Pravin's body were consistent with being in an altercation or if they were consistent with running through a heavily wooded area in total darkness where he had the possibility that he could run into trees, he could run through a barbed wire fence, which was on the property at the time. The coroner did explain to us that that could be the cause of those injuries as well. So we were going on information from the coroner.
And his take on Gage Bethune's guilt or innocence?
I do think he has some culpability in it because he was involved in the altercation with Pravin. However, I don't personally believe that he was the cause of Pravin's death.
And then the Varughese family waited. But not a waiting where they twiddle their thumbs. Lovely still had a lot of questions, and she didn't think police and the city of Carbondale had done a thorough enough investigation. So she took matters into her own hands, telling Pravin's story to anyone who would listen.
Every single day, there was I worked, came home, I sat in front of this computer, I was making phone calls. I had assembled a community together to this cause. We had peaceful protest. We had collected 40,000 signatures. We wrote letters. We went to Washington, D.C. We met with the Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky many, many times. In D.C., we met with so many congressmen and all those, I I was on a mission which I didn't know where I was going, and I was knocking every door that I could think of, everywhere. And anybody that would give me a platform to speak about my son, I did.
And the Varughese family didn't wait alone. Pravin's story caught the attention of Monica Zukis. Monica lived not far from Carbondale, and she hosted a show on an AM radio station at the time.
Talk to me a little bit, Monica, about how you even heard about Pravin's story. Like, when was the first time you even heard that name and heard what was going on?
There had been a case just about a year prior to Pravin's where another girl in Carbondale died under suspicious circumstances. She was found with a bullet hole in her head, and her ex-boyfriend, who was a dispatcher at the time, called it in as an overdose. So her father was trying to get anybody to play the 911 call because it was suspicious, and all the local media, of course, wouldn't. So he heard about me, asked me to play it, and with that one show that I did, all of a sudden I was the lady talking about the suspicious death. So somebody in Chicago had been following the Molly Young case, and they knew Pravin. When Pravin went missing, he sent me a message within 24 hours of them knowing Pravin was missing and said, "Hey, can you help me?" And sent me a flyer about Pravin.
It was a story that captivated Monica from that moment on. It was also the beginning of a relationship that still exists today between Pravin's family and Monica.
So we went to the city council meeting in April, I think it was 2016. And we stood up in front of them, and she's like, "I've traveled 6 hours. Please listen to what I have to say." And she did her part. And then I had 8x10s that I printed out of every one of his injuries. And this is on video. You can watch this video. And I literally am standing over the mayor, and God, he was so mad. And I said, "These are Pravin's injuries. At this point, I don't care about charges. I don't care about the police. We want you to at least make your officers admit that you see what we're seeing." And so the city council members were shook up. One lady was crying. It was a huge ordeal. Well, a week later, Lovely got a call and said, "There's a special prosecutor and he wants to meet with us Friday." And
the pair's years of hard work and persistence paid off. They heard the news on a phone call from Special Prosecutor David Robinson.
And he said, "I think you'll be happy to hear that we just finished up a private grand jury, and they have indicted Gage Bethune on 2 counts of first-degree felony murder." Oh my God, we just lost it. I mean, screaming, crying for so long. I think David thought we totally all lost our mind, but it was just an exhale moment of, this is all we wanted. All we wanted was our day in court. That's it, and we're going to get it.
July 2017, more than 3 years after Pravin's body was found, a grand jury returned an indictment. Gage Bethune turned himself into police. He faced 2 counts of first-degree murder for Pravin's death. Gage pled not guilty to both counts. Once Gage's trial began, big questions still remained, and each side still had a very different answer. How did Pravin die? Special Prosecutor David Robinson said Gage hit Pravin on the head, and that aggravated battery led to Pravin's confusion, him running into the woods, and eventually his hypothermia and death. Gage's defense attorney said hypothermia was the sole cause of Pravin's death. Questions swirled still about where the two were headed that night, if drugs and alcohol were involved, and what role, if any, Gage played in Pravin's death. After weeks of testimony and jury deliberation, in June 2018, Gage Bethune was found guilty on 1 count of first-degree murder with aggravated battery, not guilty of first-degree murder with aggravated factor of robbery. Here's Pravin's mom, Lovely.
I felt like the law is working. Everything worked good. And, that's all I wanted, a day in court for the jury to hear. And the jury made a decision, guilty. To me, the system worked.
Lovely says that is up until September 2018, 3 months after the jury found Gage guilty. It was his sentencing day.
We were sitting there with the victim's impact statement ready to be read. And that's when he made this stunning decision. Yeah, and I thought, what? What in the world is happening here?
In a shocking turn of events, the judge threw out Gage's conviction. Instead of being sentenced, Gage was free to go. The reason the judge threw out that conviction? It was all because of the word knowingly. He said jurors may have been confused by the wording in Gage's indictment.
And I am like, my God, why did you do this? Because we had already given the judge the victim's impact, what we were going to read and all that. And I'm sure he read what I wrote, and in there, I wrote to Gage, I forgive you, So, and I'm like, oh, maybe he thinks that since I have forgiven him, he could just let him go. I mean, the jury gave you a guilty verdict. So his job was only to sentence him. From my side, I live with the peace that Gage was brought to justice. He took the stand, and Robinson grilled him for 4 hours. And we heard from his own mouth, he hit Pravin. He showed us. And that's all I need.
Gage Bethune would not speak with me, but I did speak to Gage's attorney, Steve Greenberg. He was not Gage's trial attorney, but feels the judge was right to throw out the conviction.
I don't think he should have been found guilty in the first place. But even if you take the facts and you assume they're all correct, what he supposedly did was not a crime the way it was charged. So what they did was they charged him with a felony aggravated battery, and then because someone died, said that was felony murder.
While Greenberg admits his client and Pravin may have gotten into what he calls a dispute, he believes Gage had nothing to do with Pravin's death and that hypothermia was to blame.
There was no evidence in the case that he had any sort of a serious head injury or anything that would have made him be disorientated or anything like that. So I think it's just a tragic accident.
Right now, Gage is not facing any charges, and there's no new trial date set.
The fact is that if they thought that they could prove that he committed murder under Illinois law, they would have charged him again. They could have retried him, and they would have. And they didn't. And the reason they didn't was because they have no evidence.
But also adds this.
There is no statute of limitations on murder either.
The Varughese family has been forever changed by that cold February night. They now have a forever attachment to Carbondale, Illinois. Every February, the family makes the trip down from their Chicago suburban home to the small southern Illinois college town to hold a vigil for Pravin. And Lovely notes the family's relationship has greatly improved with the Carbondale Police Department.
They emailed me a month before asking us when we are coming, and they arrange and they walk with us. It's kind of hard to get into the spot. The couple police officers and the police chief and all, they all walk with us. And usually the chancellor from the college, they all come, and we walk and we have a prayer at the site where Pravin was found. So the police department usually gets permission from the property owner, and he has never given us any trouble. I called him once and he's like, you don't even have to call me, you can go. So after the memorial service at the site, we go to the college, and that's where the scholarship is every year.
The scholarship Lovely's talking about is a $1,000 scholarship in Pravin's honor. It goes to a student studying criminal justice, just like Pravin was. Pravin's family only got 19 short years with him. But Lovely says they were packed with so many memories.
He loved to annoy me. To annoy me, he used to call me Ma, and I hated that. And he knows that, And then he would come into my ear and say, Ma, and I'm like, don't call me that, And then we like 6 months before we lost him, we went to India. And then we were walking the street, and every minute he goes, Ma. Like, people are going to think you're a beggar, like, don't do this. In a good way, I enjoyed it, him doing that to me.
What do you miss most about him?
Everything. Mommy, what you cooking? I think him calling me that I miss the most. And then after he went to college, he used to surprise. He won't tell us that he was coming. And he comes through the garage and he opens the doors and he says, surprise. The house has become so quiet without him. So the quietness in the house, just sometimes it's scary.
While Pravin is no longer physically with Lovely, she says one sign always makes her feel like Pravin is with her, at least in spirit.
The butterfly that comes every year, it gives me a lot of peace, the butterfly that comes here, I believe it's him. So that's how I live.
Hi all, this is Briana Collins, the host and creator of the podcast True Crime in Color. First and foremost, I want to thank you all so much for listening to my podcast. When I first started it, I thought no one was going to listen but me. So thank you for the outpouring of support. Thank you for caring about these victim stories. Thank you for being as passionate as I am about this. And thank you for telling others and sharing the podcast. With that being said, this is the final episode of Season 1 of True Crime in Color. As many of you know, when I started the podcast, it was my master's project at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign when I was a graduate student. But it slowly became a passion project. It was something I wanted to do way before grad school. Grad school really made me sit down and plan this out and decide to do it. I still want to deliver quality content. These victims deserve their stories not only to be told, but to be told well, and I want to give that to you. Right now, I'm the only one editing, writing, researching, doing all the episodes by myself. And I have a lot of change coming up in my life. In December, I am graduating from the university, I am moving, and I am leaving my job. And with that being said, I really want to make sure that I do my best work. So Season 2 will be returning in 2022. If you haven't already, go ahead and like, share, subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening right now. Or you can visit our website at www.truecrimeincolorpod, and you'll be notified when Season 2 episodes start next year. Thank you so much. Please tell one other person about the podcast. Continue to listen next year. And I appreciate all your support so far. Thanks again.